Turn again, O God of hosts, look down from heaven and see. Have regard for this vine. In the name of our loving and ever-present Christ, please be seated. Been a busy week, a lot of things happening in this week, a lot of joy, a lot of sadness, a lot of life transitional pieces. Someone that you know very, very well, I think, decided that he would become 65 this week, and he's still getting used to that, lo these 2 days later. And yesterday I went to the celebration of the life and the funeral for a beautiful human being, the Reverend Joseph Howell, very well attended at St. Mark's. There was a lot of I think, a lot of interesting and emotional and intellectual, but a lot of feeling things that took place. And then we have, of course, this scripture about the vine and the bearing of the fruit, etc., etc. And here's the confusing part. Somewhere in the midst of all of these things that have been going on, I realized that, well, yesterday was the feast of whom? Anyone remember?
St. Francis.
St. Francis. And how am I going to work that into the sermon, I say to myself, and you say, how did he do that? That was not even the most subtle of transitions. But I'll tell you why this comes to mind. This comes to mind when I think about, we have two absolutely, well, I'm not going to call them wonderful cats, I'm just going to call them cats. And we have a dog now. And the interesting thing about the cats is that occasionally their behavior lends us as presumed bosses, in the house, lend ourselves to the, we occasionally say, no, bad cat. And then, of course, if you've ever seen a cat, or realize, those of you that own cats, you realize that the expression that you get from a cat is like, what? What? And of course, our doggy, we occasionally say to the dog, no, and the dog, because she was 6 when we got her, lo, these 4 or 5 months ago now, she was already pretty well set in her ways, and so she likewise wonders what that word means. And how does it fit into her life? In my life, I've been very, very, very lucky, and I'm sure many of you have, to see the works of God's creation in our fauna, in what we euphemistically refer to as the lesser animals. One evening, I was standing out by a stream in the mountains of North Carolina, and I don't know about you, but I'd always wondered about this, how this happens. How does a spider build a web across a stream? You know, these little things like that. I wondered how that happened. And so I just happened to see this kind of movement in one of these branches, and I looked up, and the breeze was blowing, and the spider raised up her back end and loosed the silk, and the breeze carried it across the stream, and it attached itself, you know, not immediately, but eventually it attached itself to a branch across the way. She kind of tugged on it, and it felt right, so she tied this end off, then went across and proceeded to build the most beautiful, beautiful spider web I have ever seen. And unfortunately, I had time to watch. She would be far better at that than I am. And I also observed in my fortunate days, I looked out the window, some of you have heard this story before, I've looked out the window of our house in, oddly enough, called Deer Park Apartments in San Rafael, California. Looked out the window to see a doe lying beneath the window, literally. The window was here, and she was lying there, and she was stressed, and I thought, what is this about? And I thought, oh, I'm going to be late for work because I'm going to be late for work. Because I have to call the SPCA to see what, you know, but it turns out she knew what she was doing. She was giving birth to not 1 but to 2 fawns. And I observed that entire process from start to finish. I count that as one of God's blessings. One of God's blessings to life, l'chaim. I've seen these sorts of things, and what does this have to do with any of this? Well, what it has to do with this is what I think is the terminology that we have given to us in Matthew's Gospel, that bearing of fruit thing. Bearing of fruit. We have this ongoing sort of polemical argument between the sort of the Pharisaic groups of people and the people who were the national Christianity people, the folks who were Jewish, and yet they were leaning and dividing and moving their way towards understanding the world in a different way, that in a way in which the law of God was opening itself up, to the people of God, to all the people of God, that eventually there wasn't going to be any need to have someone stand between you and God. Sometimes there still is. Sometimes we need someone to pray on our behalf. Sometimes we need that a lot. But generally speaking, you don't need me to pray to God. I'm not between you and God. You are between you and God. But that's all the sort of the background of what's going on here. We have this wonderful image, the image of the vineyard. And what is the vineyard? Well, in Isaiah, the vineyard is what? It's very clear. It says in the reading, the vineyard is Israel and Judah. So it's those two nation states. The southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, for a very short while, were actually bound together as one nation. So those were meant to be, as remember, the chosen people. The power and presence of God flowed down to earth, through into them and across to the rest of the world. They were blessed and they became a blessing. And now we have a whole new way of understanding, don't we, in this person, Jesus Christ. So the vineyard is the nature of the vineyard is being claimed in a different way. It's being claimed in a different way. And what's interesting to me is that the expression is bearing fruit. That bearing fruit thing. What does that mean? Well, the relevance it has to this thing about the cats and the dogs and the deer and the spiders is this. It's this, that one does not look at a cat and go, that cat is being less of a cat than God is creating that cat to be. I can assure you that our cats are the best possible cats that they can be. They get up in the morning and it doesn't even concern them just how good a cat they're going to be today. They are going to be, well, not a lot of anything really concerns them apparently, except when they eat and whether or not I've cleared their cat box for them. That's the kind of stuff that is in their lives, and the deer was doing what the deer does. Oh, so well. The spider was being a perfect spider. And it's only when we get to ourselves, I think, when we get to this place where we as human beings get involved in this conversation, where we wonder whether or not what we are doing is bearing the fruit. And what does that mean, to bear the fruit? What does it mean to bear fruit? Well, you could bear, well, as in the Isaiah passage, you could bear wild berries. Wild berries. Or you could, if you use the example of the tree that happens to be in our side yard, you can bear apples that have lots of living creatures in them. Bearing fruit. It's a specific kind of fruit, isn't it? Isn't it a specific kind of fruit? Huh. So, what are we meant to do here? What are we meant to make of all of this? See, when I look at you, one of the things that excites me about being with you and seeing you, the way that I get to see you, and that includes those times when I want to say, "Bah!" No. When I look at you, I see vast potentialities. I see potentialities I look at you and I see kinetic energy that you give into the world as you work on a daily basis, being the persons that you are. But I see within you also not just that, but I see at the same time almost Zen-like. I see potentialities within you too. Potentialities to change the world. Potentialities to change the world. Okay, Jim, I get it now. You've actually come around to your usual sermon now. This is your usual story about how I can change the world. Well, I can't change the world. Yes, you can change the world. That potentiality is in you. It is in me. It's in all of us. It's in the cats. It's in the dogs. It's in the spiders. Why isn't it in us? Why would it be in the one and not be in the other? Why would we not be a part of that fauna continuum? Why would we not be a part of that? And what would be the expectation? What is the expectation? We don't ask, do we? Again, we don't ask the nature of creation that is going on in a cat. But we sometimes wonder about the nature of creation that is going on in us, individually, uniquely. What is that? What is that that's going on in us? And here's the usual story. I'm circling back again. This is my sermon. And my sermon is that each of you is so beautifully unique. So beautifully, singularly created. And everything that you touch changes everything else that is in this world. Everything that you touch changes everything. Even when Joe Howell, when Father Howell was at his weakest in the days before he passed, he was still changing the world. His influence was still changing the world. His fruit, his vine was still bearing fruit, and his fruit was good. It's not always good when we do it. I understand that. It's not always good. We drop the ball. Forgive me for changing the imagery into some sports metaphor. We drop it. We make mistakes. We do that. But a part of the mistake that you make is the creativity of God. A part of the mistake you make is what lends us the forward impetus to do something about the realization of the fruit of the energy that is being channeled through us to inform the world and to change the world. I don't know if I've told you lately, but I love each and every one of you. I love all of you, even our guests here. I love all of you. And one of the reasons that it is easy for me to love all of you is that I see in you the potentials of a realization that will be realized in the coming days, months, years, and centuries. That the realm of God, the vineyard will find fulfillment. It will come through you. But you have to be purposeful about it. You have to be purposeful. I can't change the world. I can't change the world. Yes, you can. You can. You can open the door for someone that needs to have a door opened. You can turn to that person next to you and say, I don't know if I told you today, Barb, but I love you. You can get the cart out of the driveway of the Mime store across the way. You can get it out of the way. You can turn around and embrace a small child. That changes the world. That changes the world. You can do it. And I invite you to do it. And even more importantly, I believe, Matthew invites you to do it.